So let us go ahead and get started. I have 1 o'clock right now, so we will go ahead and start. And really what I want to do today, and the purpose here is to tell you about this Repeated Measures workshop. It's our most popular workshop, and a lot of people, the people who've taken it generally, we get great feedback. People really like it. It really took me years to figure out some of this material and how best to present it. And the reason we give this workshop is mixed models are so hard. And especially for repeated measures data, there are just not good resources out there. Like there just isn't a good book out there that you could read, even if you could read it, because they get very mathematically intense. So the purpose of this workshop is to really make mixed models accessible and make it make sense, okay? And like I said, we've gotten great feedback. So what I want to do today is tell you how we run our workshops and the kind of resources we give, and to support you in that, and how we structure things, as well as tell you exactly what we're covering. So one thing I just want to very quickly start with, let me get this going and I will show. The very first thing I want to show you is a little bit about GoToWebinar. Okay, so you should already be seeing something that looks quite like this. This is your GoToWebinar panel. You will notice you're muted. So during the workshop, when we do live webinars, everybody is muted. So you will notice there's a question box so you can ask questions. When I teach workshops, I always keep one eye. I have 2 monitors here. I know you can't see them, but I have 2 monitors here, and I always keep that question box open. So long questions or questions we're going to cover later, I might say, I'll cover that later. But if you have a clarifying question, I try to keep these very interactive. So even today, if you have any questions, feel free to just go ahead and ask them, and I will do my best to answer them. Not necessarily about mixed models, but about the workshop itself. Okay. All right, let's see. There are a few questions. I am going to get to some of these, so, all right. So it's pretty simple. You can just type in questions. Nobody else can see your question or who's asking it, but we will respond. I'll read them off so everyone hears. If you ever do want to be unmuted, this little hand button right here allows you to raise your hand. Okay. Veronica asked if there will be handouts during the workshop. Yes, there will, and we have a workshop website where we house all our resources, and I will actually, let's jump right into that. So very quickly, I just want to go over how we structure our workshops. So basically, this workshop in particular is 8 modules, okay? So each module happens once a week, and during that module, the first thing we do is a 2-hour live webinar, and you will be automatically registered for those webinars. So it's a lecture, really, and this is where we go through the concepts. This is really the meat of the workshop, and I will go through just a moment what the outline is of what we're going to cover in each of those 8 topics, those 8 modules. But we start with a 2-hour live webinar. Not during that webinar, but in support of that and available on our workshop website. You get access to a private workshop website. We have video demonstrations of all the examples we're going to be doing during the workshop. Okay, so we do those in SPSS, R, SAS, and Stata. So these are videos you can download, you can keep them forever. So we do a video demonstration. We also give you all the code so that, again, you can save that code, download it, and edit it when you go to do some analyses, for example. So it allows you to both test out in the software of your choice the examples that I showed during the webinar, as well as save it, okay? Yes, the videos are also, so each live webinar, we do give you the handouts of all the slides. We also give you a recording, and those are downloadable as well. We also give you exercises, actual homework. So a lot of times when you're learning something complicated like this, it all makes sense when you hear it, but then you try to apply it, and that's when you realize something didn't connect. So we give you exercises in different data sets. We have 5 different data sets that we use throughout this workshop. They are all real data sets from real clients I've worked with. They are all sorts of different topics, different fields. We have one that's from economics, one from language development, all sorts of things like that. So we tried to pick 5 different things with different kinds of designs and different kinds of topics. So for example, one of them is a swallowing study where it's literally subjects doing many different trials under different conditions. So it's your typical repeated measures experiment. And another one is a longitudinal data set over 5 decades. So we tried to use different types of variables, give you an idea of how these same models can be applied, some better, some worse, to these different designs. So you can really see how these same models, when they work, when they don't, and how to figure out, you know, what your random effects are and how to apply them and how to set them up. Okay. So we give you these stat software examples, demonstrations. We give you all the code. Michelle asks, how can we use a software or do we not have a license, e.g. SaaS? You can't. You can only, so we can't give you the license, but we give you the code. We give you all 4. So that you can use just one if you want to. If you don't have licenses to any of these, you can always go with R, assuming you have at least some experience in R. You wouldn't want to be a total beginner. But whichever software you do have access to, that's the one you can use. We actually recommend people download all 4, even if they're not using them, because you never know when you're going to get a new job or end up at a new university or be in some situation where you suddenly need to learn something else. So I would recommend you download all 4, even if you're not using them. So we give you the exercises, code to complete all the exercises. We give you the answers to the exercises in each of those 4 software programs. And then after we try to give you 6 days to work on those exercises after you've watched the webinar, and then we have live Q&A sessions. Now, I will be at all the Q&A sessions. We also have 2 other statistical consultants, Jeff Meyer and Kim Love, who also come to those Q&A sessions, because although I've used all 4 of these software, I'm better in SPS and SAS than in the others. Jeff, all of us know some multiple software, but Kim is like the major R expert and Jeff really knows data. They both use SPSS, Kim also uses SAS. So all of us are there to help you with all different software questions. So if you're stuck on a software issue, no problem, bring it to the Q&A session. And then for each module, we often have extra readings. Now, this is all supplementary. Nobody's going to check that you do these readings, but if we found an amazing website that explains a particular topic that we covered in the module that week or a concept, we share these with you. I personally think when you're learning complicated topics like this, it's great to read. It's great to get different wording from different perspectives from different authors. So we try to give you extra reading and resources in support of each module. Any questions so far about what the modules contain? I'll talk a little bit more about the schedule and extra resources we include. Carmen asked, are you going to cover repeated events in survival analysis? We are not. This does not include any survival analysis at all. This is really about repeated measures data where you have multiple responses from the same person and you're trying to estimate the means or the trajectories over time, not time to event. You're welcome. That would have to be a whole nother workshop. All right, let me just go through these questions, see what I've missed. Okay, Michelle asks, okay, I'm already signed up for the workshop and wonder if there's something one should do before it starts. Yeah, actually, yes. Once you sign up, you will automatically get access to our workshop website. So once you go there, there is a page called Datasets. So what I would suggest you do is go to the Datasets page. On that page, we have descriptions for all the datasets, and there are exercises to just get familiar with the datasets and the research questions. So the more familiar you are with those, the quicker you can jump right in and get started. Okay, Jayashri asks, would you say repeated measures is comparable or similar to longitudinal data analysis? Yes, there are often specific differences in terms of, there are specific differences. Longitudinal data analysis, of course, is usually done over a long time period, so you often end up with more missing data than, say, a repeated measures experiment. And repeated measures can actually be repeated on the same subject, not over time, but over, say, space. So, for example, I worked on one repeated measures data set where it was a dental data set, and the repeats, the measurements were over different teeth in the same jaw. So the repeat was spatial in terms of, you know, we had multiple responses for each subject, but they were over different teeth, not over time at all. So in some ways, repeated measures is just a little bit more of a generic term. Okay, there are a couple other questions about content. Let's hold off a little bit on those if you don't mind, because I will show you in just a moment what exactly we are going to cover. But I think I got all the logistical questions. Okay. Oops. Going too fast. Okay, so here's the schedule. I pasted it over here on the right so you can see the exact numbers. So each week we have that 2-hour live webinar. They are Tuesdays, 1 p.m. New York time. And I put the generic New York time because, and I don't know if you can see this, but we changed to red. Partway through the workshop, we changed to daylight, or from daylight savings to standard time. So if you're not in the US, you might want to check your calendars and see when you switch. But in any case, after November 6th, it's Eastern Standard Time. Before that, it's Eastern Daylight Time. And so we have that 2-hour webinar. We do that Q&A 6 days later on Mondays, so that you have the weekend, you have all week and the weekend to work on those exercises, try things out on your own data, come to the Q&A session and ask questions. After week 4, we always put in a break week. We certainly understand that 8 weeks is long and you're trying to do, you know, your job, your you might be in school, whatever. So we include this break week so you can catch up with your regular life and work. And if you got behind at all on the workshop, it gives you a chance to catch up. The other thing we'll do, and you may notice this as well, our last Q&A session, there's also a break week. We always put that last Q&A session a couple weeks after the last module so that, again, you have time to try things out, catch up on any exercises, and still have the access to the Q&A session to ask questions. And then I just want to mention things we always do in all our workshops and extra resources we do to really support your learning. So one of the things I found over the years when I've gone to workshops, like in-person workshops, is often, you learn so much, it makes so much sense, but then you come home and you feel kind of stuck because you go to apply it and you're on your own and there's no one to ask questions. So we try to give you lots of support. So first of all, we give you the data sets. And these are real data sets. We do not, this is sort of a philosophical thing as far as I'm concerned in terms of learning. We give you real data sets because it's when you work with real, messy, ugly, not textbook perfect data sets that you start to realize how to really deal with these things in your own real, messy data. So that's what we're looking at. I give you supplemental readings, both on specific module topics and on a few extra topics that are related or extensions, but not the core part of what we're talking about. We also try to give you lots of opportunities to ask questions. So in addition to those 8 Q&A sessions, you can always post questions on our workshop website. There's a place to post questions, and this way, if you're stuck on something partway through and it's not the day of a Q&A session, or if you have questions 6 months later, you can still post those questions. You have access to that workshop website for a year after the first module. So a year from next Tuesday. So through the middle of next September, you have access. So if you go to apply this 6 months from now and you get stuck on something, you have an opportunity, access to me, Kim, and Jeff, and we can answer those questions for you. We also have a set, I think 5 or 6 bonus videos on various topics. Some of them are background material that you may find helpful. Like we have one on SPSS syntax, various things like that. Some are webinars I've done. They're all webinars I've done in the past. Some are things like really digging into what's a fixed and a random factor. And so a little bit more time on a very specific topic that we can, so you can get some supplemental information on those. And so you get those videos as well. Okay. Jayashri asks, I'm employed and taking a longitudinal data analysis course, still wondering if this would be a supplementary learning or a repeat of longitudinal. I'm not really sure. Jayashri, if you can tell me the kinds of topics you're learning in that course, I can give you a better idea. I'm sure there will be some overlap, but it depends. I mean, longitudinal data analysis is a bit vague. It usually includes things like mixed models, and a specific type of mixed models often called individual growth curve models. And they, so anyway, it'll include those, but it often can include things like survival analysis. So it depends. Okay, that's fine. Yep. Jayashri's going to send me send it to me offline. Perfect, that's great. Okay, let me talk about what we are going to cover. Heba has a question, and I think you'll find this answered in just a moment. So the very first module, and again, this is 2 hours, we really, it's an overview and a review of topics that, these are topics that people get stuck on a lot. So maybe you have learned some of these in the past, but these are the type of topics where often different fields use different terminology, different notation. Sometimes certain fields, for example, maybe they use repeated measures, experiments a lot in, say, linguistics. Well, they might mean something different from when they say repeated measures than an ecologist who is, you know, repeating measurements on a stream over time or whatever. So what we do here is really break it down into what's our vocabulary, get everyone in a common language, common vocabulary, and really break it down. So what I have found in working with people in all different fields is sometimes when you get trained within a certain field, you get taught only from that perspective, and things get glossed over. And sometimes people say, well, I have a split plot design and you know, things like that. And I've found that those kind of names get in the way. So what we're doing here is we're breaking it down, removing those kinds of names, and really stopping and looking at our design and figuring out, you know, what do we have to work with here? What really is repeated? What are our units of analysis? What's crossed? What's nested? Those kinds of things. So we really just pause and do a bit of background. And then in Module 2, this is where we really start to get into it. So we start with repeated measures ANOVA. So yes, Heba, this includes the MANOVA approach. We don't do MANOVA in general, but yes, the MANOVA approach to repeated measures, yes, this is what we're talking about. Why do we start here? Okay, so first of all, we start here because most people I've worked with have learned this if they've learned anything in repeated measures. Repeated measures ANOVA can be a bit limited, and you will see why. And I want you to really understand what it can and can't do, and how the mixed models, the more complicated things we're going to get to later, are really extensions of the repeated measures ANOVA. So I want to really dig into certain things that get glossed over, like covariance matrices of residuals, covariance structures. You never hear about that in repeated measures ANOVA, but it exists. And we'll talk about things that get glossed over a lot, like sphericity. What the heck is sphericity? So we'll go through both the multivariate and the univariate approach to this, and then we'll see how this same model is approached in 2 completely different data sets. Our physical training data set has one within and one between subjects factor, and our swallowing data sets is all completely repeated. So each person has 55 responses. So that one gets kind of fun. But we'll see how these same concepts work and don't work in these different data sets. So yes, very first thing we cover is repeated measures ANOVA. So that's sort of what we're comparing everything else to once you really understand that one. Okay, Module 3, we then sort of pause. And these are 3 really completely different topics, but they're all important to understand before we really dig into mixed. And the first is setting up your data set correctly. We do it differently than we do in repeated measures ANOVA. Another is graphing. There are some really useful graphs to really help you make decisions as you're going through a mixed model. So we're going to look at these different types of useful graphs. how they look in the different software, and how some are more helpful depending on some of the design elements in the data set. So for example, if you really truly have longitudinal data analysis where your repeats are over time and it's continuous, some graphs are more useful to you in that situation. Others are more useful in more of a repeated measures experiment kind of situation where the repeats are over space or over some condition. So we'll talk about those different useful graphs. And then third, again, totally different topic, we're going to talk about model estimation and model fit. Okay, we're no longer using ordinary least squares. It changes a lot. And this is one of the hardest things to adjust to. If you are familiar with something like logistic regression or generalized linear models, you will be already familiar with this. Structural equation modeling uses it as well, latent class analysis. So you may be familiar with it. We are not getting into the math of it. It can get very complicated if you get into the math. We're talking about concepts. So I want to make sure you understand it intuitively and how that affects how we measure the model fit. And then we'll go through various model fit statistics. Unfortunately, in mixed models, we lose R squared as our favorite statistic. Okay, module 4, we then talk about the marginal model. Now, the marginal model is the closest thing to repeated measures ANOVA within the mixed framework. It's a little bit, I don't want to say it's strange. It doesn't have a good name. You may have heard them called population average models. You may have heard sometimes marginal models. Sometimes they just call it repeated measures analysis in mixed, which is sort of strange. Unfortunately, there is not a great name for the GEE fits in the marginal models. Now, we are not going to do, somebody asked, are we going to cover categorical outcome models? We are not specifically. So all of the examples we're using are numerical continuous outcomes. We're assuming normality, okay, in our residuals. GEE and generalized linear models would allow you to do a binary or count outcome, and everything we talk about here applies there as well. But I want to make sure you understand these concepts first. In the simpler case where we're not worried about things like link functions and log odds, it's too hard to learn both at once. So here we're focusing on marginal models and mixed models in the more straightforward context, but everything you learn here you can apply to the generalized case, okay? So again, we're going to really go through the marginal model. We're going to compare it to the repeated measures ANOVA. See, there are a lot, the marginal model in this mixed framework has a lot more flexibility. So there are a lot more things we can test, like time-varying covariates, and it works much better for missing data than repeated measures ANOVA. So we gain a lot, okay? And we will talk a lot here about covariant structures. So if you've ever read an article where somebody talks about using an unstructured covariant structure or toplets or autoregressive, we are going to dig in deep into covariant structures and how they apply to these models. They make more sense in this situation, so we're starting here, and then we will move on to the linear mixed model. And we'll see how some of these same things like a covariant structure applies here, okay? The linear mixed model takes a completely different approach to accounting for correlations among multiple responses from the same individual than repeated measures ANOVA and marginal models do. So those both have the same basic approach, although they calculate it differently. Here we're doing something totally different. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about how those are accounted for here. And it's actually kind of cool how it all works. And then really get into specific concepts like interclass correlations, how to actually specify your mixed model, things like that. And then again, we'll see how this kind of model applies differently in a longitudinal data set like the teacher data compared to physical training, which is a pre-post, and compared to swallowing, which is a repeated measures experiment. But these same kinds of models can be applied to any of them. Any questions so far about the content? Still have a few more modules to go. All right, feel free to type them in as they come up. All right, so then we expand on that. So we spend a whole 2 hours just talking about random intercepts. Now we're going to add on random slopes. Okay, this really gives you so much flexibility in how you analyze your data. So we're going to start with the concept, again, see how the model itself is specified when you have a random slope, how it affects the covariance structures you can choose, and then specific issues. They're I don't want to say they're side issues, but things that now become important, like missing data and centering. Okay, hopefully you're already familiar with the concept of centering, but we want to really make sure certain variables are centered before we apply a random slope model. And we'll really dig into why. We'll see lots of examples, and so you can really see why it makes such a difference. And then again, we'll run a few more examples and see how these same concepts work differently in the different kinds of designs. Okay, so now that you understand those two important concepts, random intercepts and random slopes, those are like our building blocks of mixed models. Now we're going to extend it. Now we can get fancier and see some of the different things we can test. Okay, so we can extend the model into a 3-level model. Okay, so everything up to this point, we keep it simple. We do a simple 2-level model. Now we can add a 3rd level. So when individuals are clustered in some other grouping, again, one of the beauties of mixed models is it can accommodate that structure. Repeated measures ANOVA can't. We also talk about random curvature. What if those trajectories over time are not linear? What if they are curved? We'll accommodate that as well. We can then refine the model and account for things like heterogeneity of variance over time or autocorrelation. So we will refine our residual covariance structure. That's different than the covariance structure of our random effects. So we'll talk about those as well. And then we'll talk about what the model assumptions are and how to test them, because anytime you run any kind of model, you have to check your assumptions. And then finally, Module 8, now that we've looked at all these different pieces, we're going to bring it all back together. We are going to start over, in a way, with 2 data sets that you've been using all along in your exercises, but we have not been using in the examples. And this is now, okay, if you're going to sit down with a data set and start from the beginning, what do you do? How do you build your mixed model? And again, these 2 data sets, the county data is a longitudinal one. The infant data, it's not even experimental, but it's a repeated measures done in one sitting, and there were very specific hypotheses. And it's observational data of these infants as they're learning to speak. So it's not an experiment, but we're seeing how these very specific hypotheses can be tested in this very specific design. So again, bring it back, all back together. All right. Are there any questions? I'm going to look back through to see if I missed anything, but I'm happy to answer anything. Oh, okay, great. Jayashri sent me the syllabi of the other. Okay, I will take a look at that. Irina asked, would this workshop help prepare someone to analyze eye tracking data? Probably. I would have to ask specific questions about your design and exactly what you're measuring with your eye tracking data. I actually, I have been a subject in eye tracking experiments, and I've also helped people analyze eye tracking data before. So if you are, for example, measuring, over a 10-minute period, you're looking at, how long somebody looked at various things on the screen, or it would depend on exactly what it is, but I think so. If time is a key variable or condition, like different situations, like you give them one situation and then measure something about like the amount of time they're looking at something. Can you give me a little bit more information about some of your hypotheses or the design? Because then I could give you a little more information. One thing I do want to point out in the workshop is I really encourage people to ask questions about their current analysis. So if you are in the middle of trying to analyze some repeated measures data and you want help with it, absolutely bring those to the Q&A sessions, and we are all happy to help you. Our goal is to really make sure that, by the end, you're standing on your own 2 feet and able to analyze your data. Yes, Yang asks, a logistical question. I will not be able to attend all the live sessions. Will I have access to the recorded sessions? Yes. We certainly understand that, people have classes, they have meetings at work, they have, whatever. So yes, you will get access to all the recordings, both Q&A sessions and the live workshop sessions, and you can download those and keep those forever. Yeah, the other thing, yes, and you have that, you have access to that workshop website for a year, as I already mentioned. So not only can you ask questions on the workshop website, but if we work on, if we offer the workshop again within that year, which we usually do, we tend to do it twice a year, you're welcome to come again. No extra charge. So if we offer this next spring, you can just come. You can come to all the Q&A sessions. You can sit in on all the webinars again if you want to. Some people like to do that. Okay, Sarah has a question. I am working on an analysis of a large 2-group randomized control trial with measurement at 3 time points, baseline, end of study, follow-up, with some missing data. The primary outcome is binary, but the secondary outcomes are a mix of continuous and categorical. Do you think the workshop will be of use to me? Okay. Let me ask you a question, Sarah. Do you even for your continuous outcomes, do you already feel comfortable being able to specify your random effects and know how to analyze it and interpret all the output? Do you understand concepts like the covariant structures to choose, as well as like calculate an ICC? That's really what it comes down to. If you already understand those things and what you're really trying to, okay. Sarah said, no, my previous approach would have been to use ANOVA with adjustment for baseline values, only baseline to EOS. I'm not sure what EOS means. Okay, end of study, got it, thank you. Yes, in that case, yes, it will definitely help you. Because the missing data alone will completely throw off the repeated measures ANOVA. Everything you learn here will also apply when you go to do a generalized linear mixed model for your binary and categorical outcomes. They're just slightly more complicated, but it'll get you 90% of the way there. Michelle asks, does the webinar work with tablets and phones? I will be away for a week without a computer, but I would like to attend the workshop live. Yes, totally works. A phone might be hard to watch on just because sometimes we actually have to show output, and so it might be tiny, but a tablet should be fine. Oh, Irina said her computer froze up about the eye tracking study. Yeah, Irina, if you want to tell me more about that, I'm happy to tell you, but I have certainly helped others with eye tracking. It really depends on exactly what your research questions are and exactly your design is. So if you're trying to see how things change over the course of time that you're tracking their eyes, or, you know, different conditions, then yes. Sure, you can send an email. That's no problem. Okay, you're welcome. Sarah said, okay, that's great. Missing data aspect is the big concern to me. Yeah, years ago, I worked with somebody who she had, it was similar design, but they had 5 follow-up sessions. And I think she had something like 150 people in her study. 5 had complete data. And it wasn't even like they had dropout over time. It's like some people would be missing number 2, some people would be missing number 5. You know, it was all over the place. So when she tried to do repeated measures ANOVA, she ended up with 5 cases because that's the only ones with 5 with complete data. So she lost, you know, 97% of her data set trying to do repeated measures ANOVA. And she actually came to me asking me about doing multiple imputation. And when I understood what she was doing, I said, well, we can do multiple imputation, but it's hard to do well. It's one of those things that's amazing if it's your only choice, but because it was a repeated measures study, I said, let's just do a mixed model. It does just as well with missing data, has all the same assumptions that multiple imputation does in this context. So we were able to finish it in, you know, less than a week, just doing mixed models. So if you're doing that kind of designs in your research, this is definitely something that's going to help you. And that's one of those differences between longitudinal and repeated measures. The longitudinal, really, that's very common to have the missing data. All right, any last questions? Go ahead and give me a no if you don't have any. Otherwise, I'll keep asking. I can't tell if you're typing in a long one. Michelle asked, will you also discuss nonlinear mixed models? No. The only thing we will talk about as nonlinear is we will talk about models, curvature models, so where there's the change over time is curved. It's still run within the linear mixed model context, though. So no, we're not getting into the super complicated nonlinear stuff. Nope. I want to make sure you understand this stuff first. This is hard enough. The concepts here are hard enough in the simpler situation. Yeah. All right, so thank you everyone, and if you do have any questions, feel free to follow up with an email. We really, we're not going to try to talk you into anything if it's not right for you. I will certainly try to help you decide if this is right for you. Thanks everyone. Actually, Michael, maybe you can help me here. Enrollment closes, is it Friday? I believe it's Friday.
That's correct.
At 5. All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.